Welcome to a catch-up session for those that haven't been able to attend the first 3 parts of our Research in Psychology series of online seminars. This brief session will provide an overview of what was covered, so you can join us for the final session on the 1st of May. The principal researchers on this project are Dr. Louise Ewing, Dr. Ines Mears and Dr. Marie Smith, who are regular collaborators on projects investigating face and person perception and developmental processes. Most recently, for this project, they are collaborating their shared knowledge to research links between pro-social behaviour, social media use, and empathy. As for a bit about me, my name is Hannah, and I'm a master's student studying cognitive neuroscience at the UEA. I'm part of the Person and Space Perception Lab and work alongside Head Supervisor Dr. Mintao Zhao researching microexpressions. These are defined as involuntary expressions of emotion, lasting 1/10 of a second, and provide insight into someone's internal states. Part of my research looks at how well others are able to pick up on and interpret these emotions. I previously collaborated with our lead researchers on our most recent session, and am working with Dr. Louise Ewing as part of my placement. As previously mentioned, we have run 3 online sessions where we've talked about the fundamentals of the scientific method and how researchers in psychology design and analyze the results of ethical research studies to help us understand how humans think, feel, and behave. To provide a concrete example of these steps in action, we shared an experiment that we have recently developed that students could participate in, meaning they had the opportunity to experience what it feels like to be a participant. This helped them really come to grips with the ethical considerations associated with conducting online research, the specific aims and hypotheses of our work, and understanding the approach taken to the analysis of the variables in the mix. In the 4th and final session, booked off for the 1st of May, we will be sharing exactly what we found. If you would like to participate in the study between now and then, the link is here and you are welcome to do so. I'm going to provide some background associated with that experiment now. To provide some general background, we are very interested in pro-social behaviour. This is defined by an action that benefits others, such as helping someone with a task or a problem. We know from research that pro-social behaviour can improve the quality of one's relationships, someone's own self-esteem, their health, and their achievements academically. These results are so prevalent, in fact, that it is suggested that acting pro-socially throughout your life can cascade and lead to better future outcomes. We are interested in links between social media and pro-social behaviour, which is currently still very poorly understood. Previous studies have associated it with negative outcomes, such as lower self-esteem, depression, and loneliness. But similarly, others have suggested that it increases pro-sociality and empathy. By evaluating pre-existing research, we can see that this evidence is very limited, meaning findings are not wholly reliable. Additionally, much of it has been obtained by self-report measures, which can be a disadvantaged strategy simply because people can lie. So what was our question and our hypothesis? Firstly, we wanted to know if social media usage is associated with an increase in pro-social behaviour. And so that we are using a scientific approach to examine our variables, our hypothesis became social media use is positively associated with increased pro-social behaviour. Our second research question was, is social reward sensitivity a driver of pro-social behaviour and social media usage? And so our 2 hypotheses were, pro-social behaviour is associated with increased social reward sensitivity, and also social media use is associated with increased social reward sensitivity. Finally, our last research question was, are people with heightened social reward sensitivity more likely to engage in social reward-seeking activities such as pro-social behaviour and social media usage? And therefore, our hypothesis was, the possible relationship between social media use and pro-social behaviour is explained by the shared increase in social reward sensitivity. So, what do we measure in each of the tasks? Well, in our first task, the pro-social cyberball, we used a virtual ball-tossing game to empirically measure pro-social behaviour. All participants were told that they were playing with online peers, but instead they were interacting with computerized confederates. or NPCs. There were 3 stages, a fair block and player exclusion blocks, and from them we were looking to measure compensatory behaviour. There was one player that was more excluded than the rest, and so we wanted to measure the difference by percentage of ball tosses to said excluded player, in both the unfair and in the fair block. Additionally, we also investigated variables such as the likability of players, whether participants were aware of the more excluded player, and if they had a preference to which player they would hypothetically give a portion of money to. Secondly, our experiment contained a social reward sensitivity task that was designed to activate our neural reward circuitry when viewing happy faces as compared to unhappy faces. Aaron et al. In 2001 found previous studies to show that by working to view happy faces longer by pressing the relevant keys actually led to brain activity in the reward areas. In this task, we wanted to investigate the total viewing time for both happy and sad faces, with a particular interest in the viewing time for the happy faces, as this is the social reward sensitivity measure. Finally, we also included some self-report measure questionnaires ourselves, using one of the most common self-report measures of empathy, the Interpersonal Reactivity Index, taking an approach very similar to our background research to see if we could find any similarities across results. We intended to use this to allow us to identify the construct validity of our pro-social cyberball measure. Construct validity just describes to how much our experiment actually measured what we had intended it to measure. We used what we call an exploratory analysis to let us know if social media usage is actually associated with increased empathy, to ensure that we didn't have any confounds like in previous research that couldn't really determine between increased empathy and social reward-seeking behaviours. Our self-report measures used 2 questionnaires. One investigated passive social media usage and active social media usage, whereas the other looked at the time per platform students reported they spent engaged on social media. In our most recent session, we looked at what the data was trying to tell us and how we extract meaning from these numbers. We also highlighted the importance of statistics and how the data looks and is distributed, which in psychology we refer to as our descriptive statistics. After all of our participant exclusions, removed either because individual students didn't want their data used in the study, because they completed the experiment after finding out what the study was actually investigating, or finally because the time they took to respond each question indicated that they weren't really engaged with the task, when our final sample for our study became 109 participants in total. And, as you may be wondering, did our tasks work? For our pro-social cyberball task, we find that our results align similarly to previous research, as we can clearly see a compensation in our participants tossing the ball more to the excluded player. This happened more so in the unfair block as compared to the fair block, where all cyberballs were passed to equally. We also checked for how aware our participants were that a player was excluded, and found that regardless of whether participants were actively aware or were unaware of the exclusion, compensatory behaviour by passing the ball to the excluded player more still occurred. Next, for our social reward sensitivity task, we would expect from previous research that our participants would rather prefer to look at the happy faces as opposed to sad, and found our results showing, with statistical significance, this to be true. As you can see from the bar chart, there was a great difference in key presses for happy faces as compared to key presses to look at the sad faces. Finally, looking at just one of our self-report measures that collected the total screen time usage per platform, we found, with no small amount of surprise, that the self-report data of social media engagement for our participants was averaged out to about 8 hours a day. By comparison, according to the public web data collector SOAX, that averages the time spent on social media each day for everyone active on social media, not just our 16 to 18-year-old age group, we can see a 5.6-hour difference as compared to their average of 2 hours and 23 minutes a day. This is perhaps because of an older generation who may use social media far less than our study's target audience. This may in turn lower the average engagement time as averaged by SOAPs. As you can see from this bar chart, we can see platforms that are well known for their instant gratification, such as TikTok, holding the most mean time spent on social media. Following closely, quite interestingly, is Instagram. From my knowledge of Instagram, there is also a reel function which behaves similarly to TikTok. However, there is a large difference between mean time usage for Instagram and TikTok comparatively, which perhaps suggests people are using Instagram more for communication reasons, like its counterpart Snapchat and WhatsApp, rather than as a platform akin to TikTok. Finally, the second highest social media platform in terms of time spent using it is YouTube, and this is perhaps simply because people are using the platform to watch videos of a longer duration, rather than watching for short bursts of dopamine. And this brings us up to session 4, where we will soon discuss what our findings discovered, evaluate whether our hypotheses were in fact correct, and we will talk about how these findings fit in with what we knew from previous background research. We also discuss with students what conclusions we believe we can draw from the data that you provided, and so stay tuned to find out. Additionally, if you're interested in us as your next steps, you may scan this QR code and sign up to receive information about your subject area of interest, advice on applications, and news about open days both on campus and around Norwich. Thank you.